So next up is May, which was kind of a month of maybes, really. The Prime Minister would maybe scrap social distancing in June, maybe not call upon vaccine passports to be used everywhere. In more concrete terms, the government did activate the next stage of the roadmap, getting through the gateway from, I think it was the second section to the third section, meaning that we can, large numbers can gather inside and indeed outdoors. On a more serious note, we started to realise what the effect of the COVID restrictions had been on other healthcare. That started to become clear with a 21,000% increase in patients waiting for at least a year for NHS treatment. High point of the month, well, it's been difficult to find too many high points, but it was confirmed that more and more people would go back into sports stadia. Low point of the month, well, it was the month of the Queen's speech, a pretty underwhelming policy plan for 2021 that seemed to feature large amounts of intervention, more subsidies, and no real plan for supercharging the economy. Banter of the month, best banter of the month, well, the full price we have to pay on the international stage for Brexit became clear as the UK received 0 points at the Eurovision Song Contest. So a month of maybes, and to talk me through them, I am joined by author and philosopher Dr. Jamie Whyte. Good to have you with us, Jamie. And from the home team here, IEA Research Fellow and Professor of Economics at the University of Buckingham, Len Shackleton. Len, welcome, welcome. Thanks for joining us. So I'm actually going to kick off on something I didn't mention in the highs or the lows. Dom Cummings appeared in front of the famous Select Committee appearance to give he'd long since left Downing Street, to give his assessment of the Prime Minister and what could have been done differently. And it was good maybe that should have been my banter of the month, Len. It was good banter. But I wonder whether we shouldn't feature Dom Cummings a bit more as a character from 2021. What do we make of him? I don't really know what to make of him. I can't decide whether he's somebody who wants to tear down state apparatus or whether he just thinks central planning can be done smartly.
I think he's a very destructive bloke. He's a sociopath. I think he was taken into Downing Street to do a job and he didn't do it really. He messed things up. But I don't know, what else can you say about it? I mean, in May, he sort of denounced Boris in this kind of way. Well, we've had several of those since, it doesn't seem to stick. But then I guess even Teflon wears off after a while, you know. It was one of those forgettable things, I think. I don't know what you think about it, Jamie.
Well, I've had forgotten about it, but
the point of this programme is to remind people about the events that occurred in 2021, Jamie.
Well, you're helping me out. Thank you. No, but on Dom Cummings, I think that he's got an idea about how countries should be run that many people have, which is the idea that you just get top blokes in, or blokettes, and they should run it because everybody else is a bloody idiot, and that's how everything's going to work out. Now, of course, once you've got that view, you're very concerned with the calibre of the people in the government. And I imagine Boris Johnson is a great disappointment to him. I mean, he's not, Boris Johnson is no intellectual. He doesn't seem to be very interested in details, and seems to be a bit of a cad. So altogether, it's not surprising that Dom Cummings is upset by this. But I think Dom Cummings has got the wrong idea. I think good government comes from good institutions. It needs decent people to keep them going, but he would I think destroy institutions and just have the smart people running the place, which is an idea that I'm wholly opposed to.
You'd rather keep the state infrastructure?
I would rather have constraints on the ability of executives in the government and politicians to just do stuff, right? They need to be constrained. So insofar as state infrastructure is constraining them, yes, I like that part of state infrastructure. I don't like the more active bits. He's the other way around, right? He wants to increase the activity of the state and remove the constraints.
Well, we also saw a month, Len, I mean, not that this really distinguishes it from any other, sadly, of increased state intervention. And the Williams Review came out, for example, Great British Railways, a new, even more centralised state-owned government body to replace the existing centralised state-run network rail, which wasn't centralised enough. Apparently the new system will oversee the rail links to ensure all trains run on time. Yeah, of course, you know. Yeah. We are seeing, and that's just an example of it in the review, and the Queen's speech showed this as well, this is an extraordinarily interventionist big state government, isn't it?
Oh, it is. I mean, there were things wrong with the privatisation of the railways. I think the IEA has long criticised the way in which it was done. But this is just a return to you know, the 1940s with a central planning of the railways. And you know, there are going to be train operating companies still in there, that they're basically on these contracts where all they have to do, like Transport for London does, they just have to collect the fares. They don't set the fares, they don't set the timetable, they don't do anything. And it's all in the hands of the state. And I think this is a really backward-looking development. And we've seen, since then, of course, we've seen the so-called Integrated Rail Plan, which came out in November, which is trying to rebadge things which were already planned anyway. And again, we know what's best for the North and we're going to do it this way. And it's really a wasted opportunity, but very typical of the way in which the government operates, I think.
Jamie, what do you make of this? Because I agree with Len there, but and this will be a theme throughout the show, what puzzles me is that the government talks kind of almost IEA-ish language on the benefits of free enterprise and, you know, we want to be the hub of this, we've got to go for growth, that's where all the growth comes from. And then segues seamlessly into the next paragraph. That's why we're going to nationalise this and regulate that.
It's classic cognitive dissonance, isn't it, really?
Yeah, I mean, it's an entirely general principle, economic liberty, with no particular applications.
Yes. I'm in favour of economic liberty in general, but there's no specific area where I would like to apply it. Yeah.
I mean, having an obsession with getting the trains running on time is always an alarming thing in a politician. Yeah. And the economic model of this government, if you look at what they do, not at what they say in principle, is fascism. I don't mean they're fascists in the broader sense. I just mean they've got the same idea about economic policy as the fascists, which is that you allow private ownership of the means of production, if we want to talk like Marxists, but you make sure that the owners do what you want. And so you regulate very heavily, and it's all directed, and you try to take control of investment, which they're doing with the levelling up. So it really is just the fascistic model. And I think when we get on to talking about the local elections, I think they're responding to democratic demand.
Wow, well, that's a pretty bleak analysis. I mean, I think the government's intervention. You don't literally believe it's a fascist government, Jamie. You're just saying it's the similarity is that lots of industries are nominally private, but in effect are regulated so much they're effectively nationalised.
That's the main. Yes, I mean there are all sorts of features of fascism that they don't have, right? I mean they don't go around in uniforms and have people marching them down the streets, and they've got two features I would say that are similar to the fascists, which is the economic stuff that I just mentioned, and of course they're not as extreme, but they're quite nationalistic now. But then, so again, as everybody, it's not just in Britain that this is going on. There's a rise of nationalism around the world. So no, the only interesting sense in which they're fascistic is, as I say, the economic policy.
That's quite an accusation. Len, do you agree with that? I've always kind of thought every government's social democratic in one way or another. This is just another iteration of that. And I kind of ignore the verbiage about free market liberalism that sometimes peppers a few of their speeches.
I don't think it's fascism. I mean, fascism had an economic model to it, which was a kind of corporatist thing, wasn't it? Where you had the organised labour, organised employers and all that kind of stuff. Nobody gets a look in apart from the government with this lot. I mean, who do they pay attention to?
So it's less
even worse. It's even worse.
Well, no. I mean, it goes back
I
to
said
what
May was a fairly boring a month of maybes, but no, it turns out we discovered in May we lived in a fascist society, or worse than that.
I think that I go back to what Jamie was saying before, this kind of a Platonic guardians thing. The people at the top know what's best. That's what this government's characterised by.
Actually, there's another feature of the Platonic vision, and the fascists shared this, which is that everything is done through the state, via the state. So what was Mussolini saying? Everything within the state, nothing without the state. A bit redundant, the second bit, when you think about it. But the idea was that if there's something important and good, the state should be involved in it. And you actually see this with the regulation of football, which they've suggested. Where here's something important in people's lives, and a lot of people care about football, therefore the state must orchestrate it. And that is the kind of Platonic vision of the state and the fascist vision of the role of the state. And it wasn't the one that Tories were supposed to have, right? So it's very surprising.
Well, I wonder if I can move, because of May, there's elections every year in May, and the IEA is not interested in electoral politics per se. The politicians go off and do their thing. We probably keep an eye on it because we are interested in public policy. So I guess who wins means, that our chances of getting a hearing might go up or down or sideways. But something, and I want to draw out of what happened in the May elections, something sort of strange, some sort of realignment seems to be occurring. You sort of slightly touched on this. So the Conservatives gained the Hartlepool by-election in May. They held on to the West Midlands. They won the Teesside mayoral election in an absolute landslide. I think Ben Houchin got about 70% of the vote or something in Teesside. Then in southern England, they made quite substantial losses, actually. Len, do you think, and I'm trying to, because I think this landscape matters for how people from a free market think tank interact with politicians, and probably previously you might have said, well, you know where the various parties stand. None of them really stand on IEA turf per se. Is some extraordinary realignment of the party political system happening, do you think?
There's a lot of ruin in a political party. People have been forecasting the end of the essential two-party system as long as I can remember, and that's going back a long time now. What's happening at the moment is a very strange kind of thing, isn't it? But can I see that actually leading to the destruction of the Labour Party, the destruction of the Conservative Party? Probably not. The Conservative Party has always been a very flexible kind of thing. It goes which way the wind is blowing, and the wind is blowing at the moment towards greater state interference, and the Tories can go along with that. I don't know.
Well, do you think the base is changing, Len? That I'm trying to think back to I don't have all the electoral, back to the 1980s. You'd sort of think, well, there's sort of almost the wealthier the area, the more likely it's going to vote for the Conservatives by and large. The poorer the area, the less likely it's going to vote for the Conservatives. The Tories, by and large, the middle class party. Labour, by and large, the working class party. I'm not going to say that's flipped on its head, but the trends seem to be in that direction, right? Centre-left parties are doing much better in London and the affluent south. The Conservatives are doing much better in areas where 30 years ago you would have said they'll never get a look in here. So although you might have the same two parties, is, if you like, the customer base of each changing pretty radically?
Yeah, well, if you look at the Labour Party is key to this, I think, because the Conservatives wouldn't be where they are now if you were getting, if you had a Blairite type Labour Party. The Jeremy Corbyn diversion got a lot of people excited, but really was never going to win anything. And it's a slow retreat from that. And I think eventually the Labour Party will get back up somewhere. But the idea that the South is going away from the Tories, I don't know. I mean, the Lib Dems won a by-election, didn't they? I mean, that's what. Right. How long has that been going on? Orpington in 1962 or something. This happens. It's a cycle.
But something deeper is going on, I think. Right. And I'm just going to rabbit here. I'm just parroting Steve Davies of the IEA. And he has made the point for quite some time now that there's a realignment going on. And the question is, realigning around what is the question? And the answer that Steve gives, and I think he's right, and it explains why you see affluent areas voting Labour, is that the main issue in politics had been economic. What should the role of the state be in the economy, basically? Tories a smaller role, Labour a bigger role. you can see why poorer people might vote for Labour and richer people might vote for the Tories on that basis. Now that's not so much the issue anymore. The issue is cultural. And the division is between what you might call young woke urbanites and anti-woke older provincial people. That's a kind of, and that explains why Labour's struggling in their old heartlands and doing quite well in places like London and so on, and why the Tories, vice versa. You see, the Tories didn't have to go the way they've gone. There's a liberal wing within the Tory party, and they, I think, have responded to what's happening on the ground much more effectively than Labour. They picked a side and they're catering to it. There are funny little woke elements in what they do, which I find peculiar. They haven't gotten the whole hog on the anti-wokeness thing, but they've basically picked a side. Labour's really struggling. They haven't quite worked it out because they don't want to, you can see why they don't want to give up on what you might call a straightforward working class, non-woke bloke in Newcastle. On the other hand, how do they please him while pandering to the kind of woke students in London? And I think they're lost. And Len may agree with me on this. That it's because they're lost at the moment that the Tories are thriving.
I guess what I'd like to hear from each of you is what does it mean for? I mean, the IEA tries to seed its ideas everywhere, and not especially in short-term politics, because you're already trapped within a particular Overton window at that point, kind of fighting a long-term battle. But do you think there are any changes for where the IEA should be scattering its seeds? Which fertile ground should we be looking for, Len?
Not the stony ground.
Well, I am in line with the long-term mission of the IEA, going back to Arthur and Ralph and so on, that we have to sort of change the ideas of the second-hand dealers and ideas. And, I think the IEA should make a much bigger push in the universities, quite honestly, because universities are now, I was talking to a chap recently who was talking about the way in which his economics department had been asked to decolonialise its curriculum, which is difficult in econometrics. It's that kind
sort of nonsense.
There are people within universities who don't want to go along with all this kind of stuff, and I think the IEA needs to reach out to them and get in touch with them and bring them in and so on, and widen the range of academic contexts. But that's a boring thing to say at Christmas.
Jamie, do you agree with that? I mean, politics will just take its course. We're not a political organisation, although we have policy ideas that come out of it. Where's the stony ground and where's the fertile ground?
Well, what you might hope for in the places where the Tories are now doing well is what a kind of common sense libertarianism, let's call it. What I mean by that is, who are you to push me around? You high and mighty types, piss off, right? That spirit. The problem is, and I think they've got it. That is the spirit culturally. Don't tell me, who I must believe is a woman and who isn't a woman and that kind of thing. Economically, however,
not yet.
They're not into that yet. So you might try to say, well, look, we just think about it's the same kind of issue. Think about it in the same ways, and you'd actually be better off if you had a bit more economic liberty. That's a harder sell, but that I think is one angle. At the universities and in the more liberal in the modern American sense of the word liberal, places like London and so on, I've always been frustrated by the fact that though they think people should be very free to, take drugs and have sex with whomever they want and all that kind of thing, they don't extend that principle to other stuff. And again, you want to try and push them from, so you start with what they agree with us on and try to push them to extend it.
Follows from that.
Of course, people don't care too much about what logically follows from what. But that's all I can think to do. And that was always true in a way. I don't think there's anything new about it.
Yeah. Okay. Well, gentlemen, thank you very much for talking us through the maybe month of May. I'm asking all of our guests on this marathon, as you know, to rate the year out of 10. Sometimes on Live at Littlewood I ask people how optimistic they're feeling about the future. I'm now asking our guests to audit the past, of course. The worst score you can give me, you've got to give me an integer between 0 and 10. How good or bad was 2021 against your expectations? Len, what's your number?
5.
5, middle of the road 5.
Yeah, I mean, it was better than 2020. Let's put it that way, but not great.
But it could have been a lot better than 2020, right?
5, my God. You mean that's your average year?
No, it's not my average year.
You're a
I'm
maniac.
a very optimistic person. My average year is 8, right? But,
I'm very confused now.
There you are.
I'm going to use 5 as the average year.
Right.
And I'm going to use 2020. I guess there were worse years than 2020 during the Second World War and so on. First World War, they were worse. But
2021.
2020 was, let's say that was a 1. 2021 is a 3.
A 3.
3.
Yeah,
So
I'll
pretty
give it a
low,
3.
but the trajectory is astonishing.
Yeah,
We need to plot
2022.
that on a graph, and the sunlit uplands are right ahead of us. Okay, let me, for some festive cheer, pull a cracker with me, Len. Oh, you got it. I'm going to have to. You've got that. I'm going to pull out the IEA joke. So we got a load of incredibly corny IEA jokes in this year's Christmas crackers. Well, they're not really IEA, something about politics or economics. How many American conservatives does it take to change a light bulb?
I don't know. How many?
Not going to hazard a guess at that. How many American conservatives does it take to change a light bulb?
No idea.
Only one to put it in. Fox News then spins it. These are a pretty bleak run of jokes. But Len and Jamie, thanks for picking through the month of May with us. Thanks for your average or downbeat numbers for our overall quality of 2021 index. And have a very Merry Christmas and a much better 2022. Thank you very much indeed, gentlemen.
Thank you.
Well, if you enjoyed that conversation, why not watch one of these other videos? And while you're here, remember to hit the subscribe button and the notification bell. That way, you'll never miss out on a single IEA broadcast.